So, what did they say? Oh, Trump lies. This was the Jim Acosta thing. The Jim Acosta story is that the White House said, all right, we're going to give you your pass back, but we are going to make these rules of decorum. So Jim Acosta thinks he won, but actually now all these reporters who used to be polite enough to not have to have rules like 3-year-olds now have to have the Jim Acosta Memorial Nursery School Rules. That's what we'll call them, the Jim Acosta Memorial Nursery School Rules. Now everybody has to live with them, so it's easier for Trump to throw you out if you break the rules because you'll have due process. And remember, the ruling giving Acosta back his press pass was a temporary ruling. The guy said he wasn't going to rule on the First Amendment of it. He just thought Acosta hadn't had due process. It's absurd to think that Trump has to give anybody a hard pass. So if he violates these rules, he'll be bounced. And probably, eventually, they'll probably stop having cameras in there, so he won't even get his mug on television, in which case he'll probably just change professions. But remember, the thing that he was saying to the president was, for some reason, it was important to Jim Acosta to tell us that he didn't think that the caravan coming in was an invasion. Oh, and it was so far away. Well, now here they are. They're coming here. They're Tijuana. They're ready to break through the wall. They're having problems in Mexico with them. They're attacking the Mexican police. And Fox yesterday had a real Fox News, the Bret Baier show, had a really good report saying that Homeland Security says that they have identified more than 500 criminals in these. Now it's around 8,000, 8 to 10,000 people. They've personally identified over 500 criminals. They say most of these people coming in are males, and they put the women and children at the front of the line because they know the news media will cover it. And Fox interviewed Mexican people in Mexico who are objecting to their presence there. And you just hear a couple of quick interviews they did with them.
We are here because our government has not taken control of these, what we call invasions.
I'm not really in favor of them coming the way they did. To me, it feels like they invaded.
So what's the matter, Jim? Don't you like Latino people? I mean, you're calling them liars. When they call Trump a liar and Trump plays fast and loose with the truth, you'll never hear me say differently. He says the first thing that comes into his head. But when they call him a liar, it is sheer projection because it is what they have been doing to Republicans for years, not just the news media. Now they've got Christian Bale playing Dick Cheney. He's going to play him as a drunken, power-mad, crazy person. Wow, that'll be original, won't it? You've never seen Hollywood diss a Republican before. So when they so fast to call people liars, so fast to say this stuff, it really is projection. It's all them. They've been lying about people. They just don't like getting it back. The other thing that has come out, the Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, told Mike Pence that this caravan was organized by leftist organizations. We kind of knew that already. And he says left-wing organizations are providing assistance. And at least 3 of those groups are funded by George Soros's Open Society Foundation. George Soros has openly said that the biggest problem in the world is the United States. He's clearly out to get us, clearly out to break down our civilization. But if you criticize him because he once was Jewish by blood, suddenly you're anti-Semitic. This is another act of projection. The left has suddenly started accusing Donald Trump with his 3 Jewish grandchildren of being anti-Semitic, and by extension, everybody on the right is anti-Semitic. Now, anti-Semitism knows no politics. It will go to the right and left, but the left is simply infused with it. There are anti-Semites on the right, but leftism has become anti-Semitism. And when they talk about George Soros, again, being anti-Semitic, when they talk about that being anti-Semitic, it's because they are projecting their anti-Semitism on us. I mean, the ceaseless attacks on Israel. People have written to me and said, well, attacking Israel is not anti-Semitic. True enough. There's nothing wrong with criticizing the acts of the government of Israel. But when you think a country the size of a shoebox is to blame for the problems in the Middle East, which is the size of the United States, it's nonsense. When you think the only democratic, the only free country, the only country that has gay rights, the only country in the Middle East that has rights for women, when you think that's the problem, I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious that there's anti-Semitism at the bottom of that. When you start talking about divesting in them, when you start talking about boycotting them, but you're not boycotting Saudi Arabia, where women are not allowed to breathe practically without getting permission from their husbands, I'm suspicious that you are anti-Semitic. And it's coming out now in the Women's March. Some of the women who organized the march originally are leaving, saying the thing is infested with anti-Semitism. The left is totally infested with anti-Semitism. And every time they say, oh, you criticize George Soros and he happens to be a Jew, so you're an anti-Semite, which is nonsense. Every time they say it, it's projection. Corruption. This is a huge one, huge projection. All we've been hearing when Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a big mouth, you know, some of the stuff he says is not, it's not right, and I'm not going to defend it. But when Donald Trump comes out and says they're trying to steal the election in Florida, and they say, well, he said without evidence that they're trying to steal the election. Where are they now? Where are they now that Stacey Abrams, who lost the governorship in Florida, is making these charges? Play these charges. Now, first she made the least gracious concession speech ever made, saying, I'm not conceding because the election was stolen, and now she's doubling down on MSNBC.
It was not a free and fair election. We had thousands of Georgians who were purged from the rolls wrongly, including a 92-year-old woman who had voted in the same area since 1968, a civil rights leader. It was not fair to the thousands who were forced to wait in long lines because they were in polling places that were under-resourced. Or worse, they had no polling places to go to because more than 300 had been closed. It was not fair to the thousands that were put on hold with their registrations. And it was not fair to those who filled out absentee ballots, and depending on the county you sent it to, it either was counted or not counted, assuming you received it in time. Brian Kemp oversaw for 8 years the systematic and systemic dismantling of our democracy, and that means there could not be free and fair elections in Georgia this year.
Totally untrue. Everything she just said is totally untrue. But let's just get to remember the incredible hysteria when Donald Trump said he wasn't sure whether he would accept the results of the election. He would have to see what happened during the election. And we all remember this. Hillary Clinton went mad. That's awful. That's terrible. And what have we got from them instead? We have gotten this Russian collusion thing that's not, that's supposed to delegitimize Donald Trump. It is. Everything is this projection, and the projection arises from the fact that they are surrounded only by themselves. They're surrounded only by their own. So whenever they have that instinct to project evil from themselves onto us, there's nobody around to say, well, hey, we do that too, or we do it, not them, which is also true, because this thing in Georgia, I may have said Stacey Abrams was in Florida. She was obviously running for governor of Georgia, and this whole thing was that the governor there was, in fact, obeying the law. There was a law that said you have to clean out the voter rolls if people don't vote for a certain period of time, if their information isn't correct. There were all these different laws that they were obeying in clearing out these voter rolls. It had nothing to do with her not getting elected. In fact, there was a huge turnout. If he was trying to suppress the voters, he was not doing a very good job. Kemp, if he was trying to suppress the voters, because they came out in droves, and Stacey Abrams benefited from their coming out. But she lost. She lost by like 55,000 votes, which is something like 1.4% or something like that. They counted it 1 million times. She lost. She lost. And I swear, has there been a Democrat who has accepted the outcome of an election with any grace whatsoever? But if any Republican complains, he is a villain who is destroying America's trust in our institutions. It's insane. It is insane. Acts of progression, of projection, of corruption, of dishonesty. It's really bad. Michael Barone, who is not like, he's a conservative guy, Michael Barone, but he's very numbers driven, very freedom driven, and hardly a radical. He wrote a piece about what Obama did to the Trump campaign and how close it was to Watergate. Remember, in Watergate, Nixon tried to bug George McGovern's campaign headquarters. And that, oh my God, that was the worst thing ever. He was cast out of office by the cover-up he put in place to stop people from finding out about this. So here's Barone writing about this, talking about projection. Barone says, the crime at the root of Watergate was an attempt at surveillance of the DNC after George McGovern seemed about to win the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, just as the government misconduct in Russiagate was an attempt at surveillance of the Republican Party's national campaign after Trump clinched its nomination. In both cases, the incumbent administration Nixon and Obama, regarded the opposition's unorthodox nominee as undermining the nation's long-standing foreign policy and therefore dangerous to the country. McGovern renounced the Democrats' traditional Cold War policy. Trump expressed skepticism about George W. Bush and Obama administration policies on NATO, Mexico, Iran, and Russia. There are two obvious differences. This is still Barone. There are two obvious differences between Watergate and the Obama administration's infiltration. The Watergate burglars were arrested in flagrante delicto, and their wiretaps never functioned, and neither the FBI nor the CIA fully cooperated with the post-election cover-up. That is quite a contrast with the Obama law enforcement and intelligence appointees' promotion of Christopher Steele's Clinton campaign finance dodgy dossier and feeding the mainstream's media's insatiable hunger for Russia collusion stories. In other words, under Obama, the intelligence agencies were corrupted and became Watergate. They became the Watergate burglars, and the press who exposed Watergate became accomplices in Obama's Watergate. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. And that's what they've done to themselves because they have forgotten the principles of professions that are supposed to be above the fray. And it casts a shadow backwards over the Watergate investigations themselves. It makes you wonder, was the press just being anti-Nixon? They hated Nixon with a passion. Would they have done that? Would they have covered up for Kennedy? They did cover up for John F. Kennedy. I mean, that's true. They did that. And then they went after Nixon with a vengeance. It really is a corrupting, divisive fact of our lives that these guys have simply no responsibility to the meta nature of their profession. And the only thing I can say is in fighting back against them, we really have to be careful that we don't turn into them because it's like a system. You get caught in the system. Once you start fighting back, you too don't want to give any credence to anything they say. You want to be fair, but you're so outnumbered and outgunned by the networks and the Times and all these people, this huge echo chamber that they have supporting them, that you just feel you don't want to give them any quarter whatsoever. So the big thing is how to fight back against them. This is the thing we're going to have to figure out. How to fight back against them without becoming them. Because the last thing I want to do is become somebody like these guys, the Jim Acosta media or Hollywood or any of these people who have just turned themselves into dishonest machines who are no longer serving their professions.